Okay. So today we're looking at, our last little bit on sort of how to procure employment. We'll be looking at into the interviewing process in general. So, if we're talking about it, right, what an interview is, it's the means by which you're actually going to sort of like nail down getting the job that you want, right? So you've written your cover letter. You saw a job posting online, you've written a cover letter, which has caused them to consider your application. They've looked at your application and your resume, and now they've decided, all right, well, let's pull you in for an interview and see if you would be a good fit for this job. So this is really your chance to kind of sell yourself, like everything until now, your personality has only been coming through a little bit through like written word. Now is your opportunity to kind of get the spoken information down, right? To actually be a little more specific about like who you are, really let your personality kind of shine through and, have the opportunity to kind of sell yourself, right? So it is the exchange of information, job related, by the employer and the employee. You also might learn a little bit more about the job that maybe it tells you that you're not as talented as you were beforehand. So that's another purpose of the interview. So it's going to provide the employer with an ability to kind of assess your knowledge, your skills, and your abilities, right? So they're going to assess like how much you know about the job that you're applying for, or not necessarily the job you're applying for, but like how much you know about the industry that you're, possibly trying to start working in. They want to see what your skills are, what kind of things like are just general, like just a general piece of like skill set that you have, and then what your abilities related directly to that job position would happen to be, right? Do you know how to, in our industry, conduct a proper fitness assessment, write a program that's going to be effective for your clients, and then work with those clients, and actually like facilitate change within them. Or, a lot of times, one of the biggest things in a lot of gyms, depending on where you work, is do you have enough like know-how to be able to actually sell yourself and be able to sell gym memberships, or not gym memberships, but training memberships, right? Because again, like sometimes like selling can be one of the most difficult parts of this job because it is a very sales-based industry. But, and that's not what any of us got into this industry to do. None of us got in here to become like salespeople, right? We got in here to kind of, help others. But you can't do that unless they have sessions, and they can't have sessions unless you sell them. So they are looking to see, like, do you have that kind of mindset? And do you have that ability? This is where you're interviewing. You do want to, again, show as much personality as possible. So, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, your KSAs there, that is a big thing that they are looking for in your interview. So having some of that information laid out on your resume is going to make it easier for that information to come up during your interview. So you should be using this to get a very realistic idea of, what your job duties are, what your responsibilities are, and then what any of the issues related to that job are. You want to remember that like a lot of times people think an interview is, a lot of people who get very nervous in interviews see it as a very scary test, like a lot of people see it as something that they are very nervous about because like they're, it's almost like Mike Birbiglia has this great joke where he's like it's like driving by a cop, like if you're driving by a police officer, you're not speeding, your seatbelt's on, you're not breaking any laws, but you're looking around and you're like, oh, I hope they don't notice that I'm driving, like, you just get a little nervous. That's kind of how a lot of people are about interviews. They're like, oh, I hope they don't notice that I want this job. Like, that's not really what an interview is actually like. We kind of have that viewpoint in our mind, but that's not really what it's like. You got to remember, this person wants to hire you. They want to hire anybody. They just want to get this process over with and get back to their normal day-to-day activities. So they would be stoked if you're the perfect candidate. So this is an opportunity for you guys to interview them just as much as they are interviewing you. You know, you want to figure out like, you know, yeah, you applied for the job, but is this the job for you? Do you think you'd be a good fit, or do you think you're going to enjoy working in a place like this? You know, I've definitely gone on interviews before and immediately was like, nope, this is not for me. I even went to like the one time I did not instinctively listen to my gut feeling, and I was like, well, maybe it was just sort of a weird interview process, and they decided to hire me, and I went to my first day of work, and literally about, I'd say 2 hours in, I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, and I took off. I was like, thank you for the opportunity. You know, I really appreciate it. You know, I hope I didn't waste too much of your time, but I'm out of here. And if I had asked a few more questions during the interview process and kind of clarified these things that kind of gave me an uneasy feeling, you know, that wouldn't have happened. So it is a two-way street, the interview, even if though it feels, it may not feel that way at first. So remember, you're definitely going to procure this interview with a very well written and effective resume. The most effective resumes are the ones that are actually focusing specifically on like a job title, right? So for whatever job you're applying for, if you're applying for the job of personal trainer, then your resume should reflect that, right? It should say personal trainer. If you're like, you can see what was that resume? For those of you who are morning students, we decided to go with one of the fancy Canva ones last night in the evening class. So here's the resume we made yesterday in the evening session. And you can see like we went with a little bit more kind of fancy, modern, not really my style resume, but like, you know, we want to give everybody kind of a different flavor here. Whoops, clicked my email. So you can see like we put the title at the top, right? Like what we are applying for. That is something that should be, you know, on your resume. Like what position are you applying for? Personal trainer, group exercise instructor, GM, whatever it happens to be. And then that way, like, you know, it's very clear that you are looking to work in this very specific corner of the industry. Now you can also know a little bit about like, you know, the skills that are required for that job, right? And so like now you can also cater the other parts of your resume to be even more specific. So put a clear objective on there. Make sure you're listing your education. That includes like any school that you went to, as well as your certifications. Relevant and non-relevant work experience are both going to be good. As your resume gets fuller, you'll get the non-relevant work experience sort of off of there. Your references should be on a separate sheet. We already kind of talked a little bit about that, but when you're making a reference sheet, you know, 3 names, 2 professional, 1 personal reference. And if that last personal one can still be someone who is relatively professional, like that's a pretty smart thing to do. Don't use your family. And then always with your cover letter and your resume and your references sheet, give it to your friends, give it to your family, and have them proofread it for you. They might say, you know what, I don't really like this sentence. I mean, we have written so many different cover letters and so many different resumes in this class as we've kind of gone through it over the years. And every time I look at the old ones to use them as examples while I'm like lecturing, you know, every time I see it, my feelings change. I'm like, you know what, I would reword this, or I wouldn't use that acronym there. I'd, you know, write out the whole thing. At the time, it might feel really strong, but then like later on, you know, your opinions might change. You're constantly evolving in this industry, you know. That's like me. My feelings on certain exercises have sort of evolved over time. I was like, you know, when I was younger, there were certain exercises that I was like, that is dumb. You don't need to do that, you know, and now I'm like a big fan, you know? So your opinions are going to change consistently. So make sure that your resume is a living document. You know, it is something that you can kind of update regularly, and give it to your friends and family for feedback, you know? So let's say you've done all that, right? You did your resume, you did your cover letter, you know, your application is in, you get the first phone call, right? So you want to make sure you are preparing for the interview before the interview. And what I mean by that is like generally people picture the your first interview as like the in-person meeting. Your first interview is the call to set up that in-person meeting. That's technically your first interview. I know it's not officially the real interview is like, like, hey, this is so-and-so from so-and-so. We're calling to set up an interview. And then like that's the real one. But like honestly, like you should know about the company that you're applying for before they call you. Anytime you're putting in a job application, guys, do a little bit of research. Researching an organization before you have that interview is going to give you a little bit of knowledge into what skills, knowledge, and abilities they are looking for in that job, right? So it's really important to kind of determine what tasks must need to be completed for the interview. One of those things is absolutely knowing specifically about like the agency that you're applying for. Another one is like you should understand like, what the travel situation is going to be like if you're applying for a job outside of town. Like what are your travel dates and itinerary and all that stuff. That's probably very rare. But if your interview is scheduled for like a specific hour, you should also know, a little bit about like what your commute's going to be like. That's especially important here in LA because things change so often. So you need to know like what traffic looks like. If you've been traveling, let's say you're applying for a gym that you have been to, right? Maybe you're applying for a gym that you work out at regularly and you're going into the gym every day at 6 a.m. Takes you 20 minutes to get there. At 6 a.m. and then you got an interview at like 1 p.m., which is the middle of like the work rush hour, right? Your commute's going to be different. You do not want to be caught blindsided. So make sure that like, a little bit about like, what your commute's going to look like. So do a little bit of research into the agency, increase your knowledge about that organization. And if you can, try to figure out a little bit about your interviewer, who the interview is, what the position looks like, all of those things. Not only is that going to give you things that you are going to know how to talk about during your interview, you're also going to build up your own confidence, which is pretty huge. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable. The biggest thing that people are afraid of is what they don't know or what they don't understand. So by knowing a little bit about the job that you're applying for, the interview and stuff, you're going to feel much more confident. And when you walk in there, you're going to have that air of confidence, which is going to make your interview much, 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 much stronger. So knowing a little bit about the people who are hiring you can be really helpful. A good example, when I was applying for the Biggest Loser thing, I was asking my friend who, kind of got me the interview. I asked her, I was like, who am I applying with? It's like, oh, her name is Michaela. And I was like, okay, cool. You know anything about her? And it's like, yeah, she's from the Midwest, she likes dogs, this and that. And I was like, okay, great. And like, sure enough, like, I had a roommate who had dogs at the time. And so I remember during the interview, dropping this line that was just meant to be kind of like an ice-breaking joke. When she was like, so why do you think you want to work here? And I was like, well, I know that it would be wonderful to work in a beautiful place like Malibu. I know that you have a lot of people. So it's always really good to, I'm excited about the idea of working with lots of people because then it'll feel like I'm having a bigger impact in the world. And then I closed it with a small joke saying, and I know that if I make, I think if it pays well, I'll be able to provide a better life for my roommate's dogs. And that was like a small joke that I said, and it was, it went over very well. Like she thought that was really funny. And so that's like I knew a little bit of something like that. It popped into my head. It was something funny, but at the same time, like it sort of endeared me to this person. And it was a good icebreaker. It really took the tension off of the interview. So little things like that, knowing, I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have like a little bit of knowledge, about the fact that I asked my friend, I was like, how many people do they train? It's like, I know they trained a lot of people. So that was something I could talk about. I did know that it paid well. And then I knew that like, I knew that, she liked dogs. So knowing a little bit about the people who are going to hire you can be a really helpful thing as well. So it gives you a little bit more awareness. It allows you to kind of talk about specific things related to the job. Like I said, know what your commute is going to be. Make sure that you absolutely are fully aware of like how you're going to get there. What's the parking situation like? Honestly, guys, we've had a lot of people come through Sochi. We haven't been able to do this in over a year at this point. But we used to have like, 24-hour fitness, Crunch Fitness. Those two would come around a lot. Equinox would come around a lot. They're like regional HR people, they're like hiring managers or whatever, would come around and they would tell us, we would always ask like, what are the number one things that employers are looking for in potential employees? Like, what's the biggest thing you look for in someone when they go in for an interview? What's the best thing they can say? And it's kind of funny because they don't actually ever give us a really straight answer for that. But one thing that is in terms of like what they should say, but the biggest straight answer they all give us is they're like, don't show up late. Which honestly, I'll tell you that I've conducted interviews as well. If I've got somebody who even texts me and they're just like, hey, I'm running 5 minutes behind, I'll be there soon, that person is immediately put to the bottom of my list. It is not like they didn't make it a priority. It's not really that important to get to this interview on time. Being late for something like that for a job interview is an incredibly unprofessional thing to do. So know what your commute's going to be, know what the parking situation is. Do you need to get validated? You should be arriving early for your interview, always, 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 and ready to go. Not like 20 minutes early, but like 10 minutes early. That's perfect. 15, also pretty good. I will say I've had people also show up a little bit too early. I've had people like show up for interviews like 30 minutes early. And my brain goes, man, good for them. Like they're clearly a go-getter. They're putting the effort in. But at the same time, like it's like I booked them specifically for this time and I'm not available right now. Now I feel this like pressure to wrap things up and try to go a little early. That's also kind of annoying. So arrive early, but don't arrive too early. Whoops. Where to put it? So other things you need to do. You should do practice, guys. You should absolutely do a little bit of like a self-assessment. It's really important for you to know a little bit about like what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, right? Take a very realistic assessment of your skills, abilities, your knowledge, your experience. What is going to make you an ideal candidate, right? Isaiah, I know you've got experience like working with people already. So like that's something that you can talk about absolutely during your interview. Bay, I know that you are super excited. You work out all the freaking time and you're in great shape. So that's something you like, do an assessment. What are your biggest strengths, guys? What do you think you're going to be good at during your interview, right? Most of the people on this call, I know all of you guys are fun conversational people. That's a great thing to kind of highlight during the interview. So do a self-assessment. What are your biggest strengths? Me, I know my biggest self-assessment. My biggest strength is that it is easy for me to talk about stuff. I'm a talker. And so like, that's something that like, I'm going to try to take as much advantage of during my interview as possible. And so taking an example of that, and then you are probably going to get that very dumb interview question. If it's me, I'll never ask this question because I think it's stupid, but you will get that like, what did you say your greatest weakness is? Interviewers love to ask that. Don't go with the humble brag. Don't go like, oh, I'm too punctual. Don't do that. Give a very realistic assessment of like what your biggest weakness is. For you guys, honestly, I would say you can say, and this is a great weakness, to be like, well, I know that I don't have a lot of experience necessarily working with, established, I don't have an established client load yet. I'm still relatively new to the industry. And then you follow that up with, but even though that is something that is objectively true, I also think that could be my greatest strength. I'm excited to be very trainable. I'm excited to like kind of hone my skills, and I'm hungry to enter this industry. So like, yeah, that's a really accurate assessment of like, look, I know this is something that I struggle with, but I also think that, and this is true, I think a lot of times people's greatest strengths can often be their greatest weaknesses. And I think sometimes our weaknesses can be turned into our strengths, So perform that self-assessment so that you're very aware going into the interview, and then you'll have something to talk about. And always practice your interview with your friends or your family if you can. Try to anticipate questions, even if you just get online and you just Google common interview questions. I don't know if you need to go through all friggin' 50, that's a lot. But have your friends and family just ask you a couple of these things so you can start practicing. Tell me about yourself. What are you going to say when someone says, tell me about yourself, right? Well, I'm 6'1", I was born and raised here. My parents' name. No, that's not what they're interested in, right? Tell me about you. Like, who are you? It's like, well, I'm passionate about the fitness industry because I've had my own personal journey in terms of fitness, and I'm really excited to inspire others to facilitate, change in their life. Or I'm really passionate about health. I come from a family that honestly doesn't take very good care of themselves health wise. And, or I grew up with a lot of health problems, and then I started taking care of myself. And I'm really excited to kind of inspire others to do the same. They want to know about you. They don't want to know about they don't want your baseball card statistics. They want to know your story, how'd you hear about the position? Why do you want to work for the company? Let's see here. Let's go down to number bonus. There's bonus questions too. Are you planning on having children? That's a weird one. What? They should not ask you that during an interview. That's a dumb, yeah, don't worry about that one. How do you like to be managed? That's kind of a fun one, right? Are you looking, it's like, what if, you can say something like, well, I actually really like to have a lot of structure in my management. Or you might say something like, well, I'm a self-starter, so I love someone to give me specific tasks so that I can kind of forge my own path in order to accomplish things. What is your style? Start thinking about that, guys. These are all things that you can say during your interview that make you a confident, effective interviewer. Rehearse your answers, basically. And this also gives you an opportunity to fine tune your body language as well as your non-verbal cues. So, I always forget this freaking statistic. What percentage of communication is non-verbal? It's like 40%. 70 to 93%. That seems so high. All right. Well, according to lifesize.com, this is our, I don't know about that. 70 to 93% of all communication is nonverbal. That sounds a little high to me, but there is definitely a lot of nonverbal communication that's going to go on, right? So try to fine tune your body language. I know for me, I tend to have RBF. For those of you who don't know what RBF is, it's resting bitch face. It's like, when I'm expressionless, a lot of times I look angry, I think, or at least just bored, but that's just my natural kind of, if I'm aware of something like that, I'm going to try to be as expressive with my face as possible during my interview, right? But other forms of nonverbal communication, a little bit more traditional, you see this kind of thing, right? People who do this, or they keep their hands in their pockets, or they clasp them in their, having your being closed off like that, this is indicating that you don't want to have a conversation with someone. You are closed off to the conversation. So practicing with your friends and family gives you an opportunity to kind of fine tune that body language. This is where through teaching over the years, and also just working with clients and being a personal trainer, I definitely used to do a lot of this. I still do. I think that's my natural way of being, because I am actually, kind of introverted in some capacity, in some ways. And so I will sometimes have an introvert's body language. So learning how to be a little bit more open, I started practicing speaking a little more with my hands, and just keep my hands, engaging those while I'm talking. Now I'm kind of overdoing it right now, but that has helped me keep my body language a little bit more open, which makes people feel a lot more comfortable. You should be practicing making eye contact with people as well. Eye contact is a great way for people to feel like they are being heard. We talked about this. We talked about this in our last class, actually, where we're trying to build a little bit of rapport with our clients, right? When you're trying to build rapport with someone, you're trying to build a relationship with them. You want to engage in active listening. Active listening is, actually listening to your client by paying attention, like looking at them directly while they are speaking, and then asking them questions related to like what they said. Love that during an interview. If an interviewer says like, well, do you have any questions for me? You can circle back to anything that you just talked about. Guys, I think we're going to see this later on, actually. Hold on a second. Let me scroll down. Maybe not. So when you go in for your interview, one of the things, like, they will often at the end of the interview ask you, do you have any questions for me? You should absolutely have some questions for them. Now, don't say like, well, what's the pay? Don't do the cheeky one, when can I start? Those are kind of classics that are just, I mean, one of them is a classic, but it's just overly used. Don't do that anymore. But asking questions, be like, yeah, well, what does the typical clientele look like? Or saying like, when it comes to like scheduling, how much control do we have over like our client schedules? What's our cancellation policy? Little things like that. That just shows like a little bit of insight that you're serious about like taking this job. Little things like that. How much time do we have? Is it 60-minute sessions, 30-minute sessions? What does your sales packages look like? What kind of support do you give to your sales team? Millions of questions you can ask, guys. There's a lot of options out there. So there's a great opportunity for when you're practicing for your interview, you can develop your questions that you are going to ask, which is only going to make you seem even more insightful to the interviewer. So what to wear? Now, the PowerPoint is, we're going to see a little bit of a disagreement here, but you want to wear dress shoes. For men, dress shoes. Guys, wear dress socks. Do not wear freaking white socks with like, dress shoes. That is a huge mistake that looks very, it makes you look like you're 16 years old. So match those darn things in color, or at least complement it. You should be wearing slacks or even suit pants. If you want, you will see this is saying like go with like a full, like neatly pressed suit. I don't think that's very applicable here. It's actually a little overly conservative, especially here in California. We live in the West Coast, right? Let's see here. West Coast, business casual. Let's see here, versus East Coast. Yeah, let's see this. I'm kind of, I'll bet if we can find a funny picture here. This will be mostly like funny, but yeah, there we go. Look at that. Like that's the old, it's the old like Apple versus Mac thing from back in the day. But honestly, there is a little bit of a difference here. The East Coast is much more conservative about how they dress. They're often like wearing a lot, you're seeing something kind of like this. This is a little bit more of the sort of modern business casual look. This would be absolutely appropriate for an interview. It's a pair of slacks, a nice pair of shoes, a belt that matches, and a button-down shirt. I'm not saying you necessarily have to go in with like a freaking blazer and like a full-on suit or anything like that. Actually, all of these are really good examples of like business casual, except for this one. That's jeans. Don't wear jeans under any circumstances. So that is sort of what I'm looking for. So dress shoes, dress socks, slacks, or suit pants, a matching belt to go with your shoes. I don't know why I would do it. A button-down shirt. Ties are optional. In certain cases, if you're going with like a nice sweater or something. I always wear a tie to an interview. My go-to interview outfit, honestly, was really close to what I just saw. My go-to interview outfit is basically this with a black tie. This one here on the right, I'll wear gray slacks with like brown shoes. This is a short sleeve shirt. I wouldn't wear a short sleeve shirt. This isn't a full, actually, yeah, this is like a polo. I would do this, but like a button down, let's see, gray slacks, white shirt, brown shoes, black tie. There we go. Or something like this. This is basically what I'll wear to an interview pretty much every time. I don't know about that super skinny tie. And I don't know about boots, but like, you know, very, very, very simple outfit. That's professional. You know, it shows that I put the time and effort into looking nice for my interview. That shows that I'm going to put the time and effort into looking professional when I show up for my hopefully new job, right? So make your hair nice, shave your face, or at least, you know, trim it to where it needs to look. Don't wear too much freaking cologne. God, that's so funny. I think I've had this happen during interviews where like my brain has gone like, man, how much cologne is this person wearing? Like, we're not on a date. Like, you ever joke, you know, Drakkar Noir is filling up the elevator here. Yeah, don't do something like that. And then solid colors. You know, me, I like a white shirt, but you could always go with like navy. You know, this is a great outfit for an interview as well. You know, just business casual, guys, right? That's what you want to look up. If you want to know what to wear, look up men's business casual. All of this is very, very, very acceptable. You're going to be in really good shape. Jeans are sometimes considered business casual. Just don't wear jeans. Just make sure you're wearing slacks. And you're going to be just fine. So for women, quick asterisk, I realize I'm definitely no expert on women's clothing, but I have talked this interview a couple times and I have asked my female coworkers. So solid conservative colors should be worn. If you're going to go with a pattern, go with something simple. Again, I don't think you necessarily need to go with like a full-on suit, although I will say this, which is kind of a bummer. Women in the fitness industry do have it a little bit tougher than men do. So you actually do have a little bit more wiggle room to go even more conservative. You do want to wear like, you know, like a dress suit or something like that. That's okay. It's not quite over the top as often. But generally, like suit pants or like a skirt is worn. If you are going with like a skirt, make sure it is at least knee length. Don't go with like an extreme slit or anything like that. Go with flats or medium heels that are closed-toed. Don't go with open-toed shoes. I know that's kind of a big no-no in the interview world. A belt is optional. If you're doing slacks, though, make sure you're wearing a belt. Just kind of part of it. Like I said, simple colored, like solid, or at least a very simple pattern. If you're doing like blouse is going to be recommended. Again, if we go with, you know, women's business casual, right? We can see a lot of different examples here. This would be solid. You can see, again, closed-toed shoes. Those are a little high heels. This is probably pretty good, right? Oh, those aren't jeans. Yeah, actually, all these are really good examples. So business casual, that's kind of the key here, guys. I know a lot of times, again, if we were on the East Coast, maybe my tune would be different. It would be like, nope, go with like interview formal, you know? But that's just not California. And it's just not the West Coast. It's super not LA. So business casual is what we're looking for. Simple jewelry, simple makeup, you know, a couple accessories are okay. And again, avoid too much perfume. That's so funny. I literally have like had people come in for interviews and I've just been like, man, that's a lot of cologne. Man, that's a lot of perfume. Which is just very funny to me. I don't judge too harshly, but definitely pay attention to it. So color is really cool. Color is a very dynamic tool that you can kind of use when it comes to sort of enhancing your appearance for things. You know, when it comes down to it, try to complement, you know, what is going to look best for you, depending on, you know, your hair color, your eyes, whatever. Again, try to keep your hair neat, keep the cologne to a minimum, keep the perfume to a minimum. Your appearance indicates your attitude. That's what's important here. Are you going to be wearing slacks in a personal training session? Of course you're not, right? The best part of this job, guys, like once you have the job, the best part of being a trainer is that you get to wear shorts to work for the rest of your life, or leggings. You know, you're comfy. It's comfort wear every single day. It's the best, you know. But for an interview, you want to make sure that you are dressing, you know, business casual, because it shows that you're taking the interview seriously. It's another one of those unwritten rules, right? Everyone's resume should be 1 page. It should be 1 inch margins. Your font should be readable, you know. Everybody just has to kind of, your first paragraph in a cover letter should be where you found the job posting and, you know, what position you're applying for. Your closing in, you know, paragraph in your cover letter should be, you know, thank you for the time. Here's my contact info. Everyone kind of follows these unwritten rules. They're all basically the same, but that shows like a certain level of respect, and it shows like a professional attitude, right? Um, just like showing up early, you know. Could you be the world's greatest trainer and show up for an interview late because, you know, there was some type of accident or something, and you were like, you know, you call your employer and you're like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize the commute was going to be this long. You know, I didn't realize it was going to be like this. I apologize. I will be there in, you know, 15 minutes or whatever. Could you do something like that and still get the job and maybe be the world's best candidate? Yeah, it's possible, right? But like immediately it's going to conjure up images in this person that say like, man, like if they can't, you know, if they're not planning ahead, or, you know, if they didn't account for traffic, what happens if like they have a client who, you know, doesn't account for this or that? You know, this person didn't have a backup plan. It's going to make the interviewer nervous, right? That's going to be their first impression of you. God, I had an example that I was going to talk about. Oh, this is also one of the reasons why we don't really put our address. We generally just put the part of town that we are in. I'll you know, I had an interviewer that I still called in, but I was very nervous about. They were applying for a job in Reseda, and they lived in Pasadena. And I was like, man, that's kind of a commute, because they were the 5 p.m. instructor. I was like, you're gonna be driving through rush hour traffic to get up here twice, because you're gonna kind of go past LA. I was like, I don't know, man. And I almost didn't call them in, based strictly on where they were living in town. But I was like, you know what? That's not really fair. They applied for the job. They know where we're at. Clearly, they think they're capable. And so they showed up for the interview on time. They did great. But I asked them like during the interview, it's like, so what do you think of the commute? Like, do you think this is like sustainable for you? And it kind of like, you know, they were like, you know what? I'm not sure that it is. You know, then we went our separate ways. That's okay. Like that's, you know, I'm sure they still developed some skills like coming in for the interview. They still got something out of it. I got something out of it. I appreciated the time, you know, to analyze the, you know, their information and stuff. But like, you know, this person was very, very professional. I'm willing to bet that like even they on some level were like, I'm probably not going to take this job, you know, but they put the effort in. And even if they said, man, I really did not enjoy this commute, but they like dressed nicely, they interviewed well, they took the whole thing very, very seriously. I have nothing but respect for that person. And I would absolutely hire them if they, you know, would have lived closer, and if they also hadn't said, you know, yeah, I'm probably not interested. So yeah, you can absolutely get away with, maybe you show up for your interview in jeans and you are just the best freaking trainer in the world. Maybe they'll give you a shot, but you now have to like you have to be the best trainer in the world. You have to overcome their preconceived notions. And trust me, guys, I am definitely one of the least judgmental people in the world when it comes to like appearance. I think appearances are the most deceiving freaking thing ever. But it is still something that all of us are going to consider, you know. If somebody doesn't take the time to dress up for their interview, I'm like, maybe this interview is just not that important to them. Maybe they already have another job that they're going to prioritize over this. All right. not really who I'm looking for, you know? So final preparations, make sure you review any of the information about the company. Before you go in for your interview, do one final sweep, learn about the company, give them a call, you know, learn what you can. If you are going in from like a hiring agency, so that's probably pretty freaking unlikely for any of you guys, but the closest you are going to have to that is Sochi's Career Services. Miriam, who is our career services director, who is going to help you guys in the job hunting process. She's going to give you a little bit of information about the company that you're applying for. She's done a little bit of research. So give her a call and be like, hey, my interview is tomorrow. Is there anything else you can tell me about the company that I'm applying for? You know, I've done my own research, but what else do you know, right? So review some of that, you know. Get your resume set, make sure you're reviewing the information so you know what's on it again. Review what you said in your cover letter, make sure your reference sheet is active, and then set your resume, cover letter, and reference sheet aside and put them in a portfolio. This will make you look so much more professional. Look, Staples portfolio. You don't need one of these $70 executive leather portfolio things. You don't need anything like that with your freaking name on it, but just go and get a simple, looking for one that's black, please. You know what? Shopping. $20, that's still too expensive. I'm looking for like $3, internet. Help me out here. All right. Not a fan of this, but I mean, leather for $9. That's not bad. There you go. Little leather portfolio with a little notebook, with a little notepad in it. Something like this. Throw your resume and cover letter into the little pocket that it's going to have here. That's not bad. Again, like I'm looking for like, you can get one for like $3. Go to staples.com. Portfolio. Close it. Bring your cover letter, your resume, your references sheet. Bring them in one of these little plastic portfolios. $18. Good Lord. Can we, internet, you're letting me down. I'm not finding what I want quickly. There we go. 4-pocket portfolio folder with fasteners. It's made of paper. Could not be simpler, right? Not seeing a lot of detail in this picture, but look at that. That just has a little space for you to put your cover letter and your resume. Showing up with that makes you look so much more professional. And it also shows that you care about your professional image, you care about these documents, and you are trying to present yourself in your best light. You take yourself seriously. Do that, guys. I'm serious. And then also map out your freaking commute. Again, don't show up late. It's the #1 thing that is going to turn an interviewer off. I have heard so many different people come through Sochi, and we've done these, class talks where, they're going to walk you through what it's like to work at their company. And they always go, do you guys have any questions for us? And I will always ask, what's the biggest thing you look for in an interview? And the #1 thing that people always say every single time is just show up on time. That seems so simple, but you should not be late for your interviews. So map it out, have all your professional materials ready. All of that is going to put you, one notch above. Already, if you think about it, anybody who does show up late, you're already going to get the job over them. You know it, as long as you didn't, as long as you're not being one of those people. So there are a lot of different types of interviews. Let's go ahead and talk about them, right? So there are what are called screening interviews. This is usually the initial interview that's sort of like the first contact to set up your actual real interview. So like I said, like that first phone call is almost an interview in and of itself, if it's with the person who's hiring you. Sometimes it's not. Usually, sometimes it might be through, somebody at the front desk or an operations manager or something like that. And you'll be interviewing with the training manager or whatever, but that's a lot of times your screening interview is the person who is actually going to conduct your real interview. So this is to make initial contact with you to set up the later stages. You know, a lot of times this is just over the phone. And so it's an opportunity for you to just kind of make your first impression. If you know that you're doing this phone interview, a lot of times you're not going to have time to prepare for that. You know, you're going to put your application and all of a sudden they're going to call you, and, you know, maybe you were at home like making dinner and you got an unknown number call you. And so you answer the phone and you're like, crap, it's the interview. Turn all your burners off, take a seat, and try to like sit upright and treat it as if there's a person across the table from you. You are physically in the room with them interviewing. Your tone of voice is going to be much more professional. What you say is going to be much more professional. You're going to take it much more seriously. So, or if they send you an email and say, great, we're going to give you a call tomorrow at 2 p.m. to set up your physical interview. Okay, that's also an opportunity. If you know that that's phone screening is going to be, you know, that telephone interview, just like we're going to talk about when we get down to telephone interviews over here, you know, put the dog in the other room, you know, and dress up for your interview. This sounds crazy, but like, yeah, dress up even if it is a phone interview. It will make you take it more seriously. That's why it's so fun. I mean, again, I get to wear shorts every day to work and a t-shirt, you know, best part of this job. But I can promise you, like, I would never do, like, a lot of people have been making these jokes about how over the last year, like, they've moved to Zoom and now their job is like online. And so they'll be wearing like a blazer here and like pajama bottoms down below. If you have a web interview or something, don't do that. Seriously, you will take it more seriously if you get fully dressed up. There are also panel interviews. These are relatively rare in the fitness industry, although they may still happen. A panel interview is where you are actually going to interview with a team of individuals. So the closest you'll get to this is where the training manager will bring in one other person. You know, a lot of times you will interview in front of like 2 people a lot of times. Just because I think that's just our industry in general, because yeah, this is a very personal industry, right? There's a lot of, like, it's a very conversational industry. So panel interviews are where there's sort of a team. These are probably the most brutal types of interviews you're going to have to do. The most I've ever been in is just like 3 people, but even that it's a lot, because you're basically going to get like rapid fire questions from each of these people, and you're going to need to like address them. And so sometimes this can be a hard one to kind of prepare for. But if you are doing this, this is sort of like a Q&A session almost, right? So panel interviews, like I said, they're pretty rare in the fitness industry. But like, yeah, for me, when I was interviewing for Sochi, for instance, which really isn't even the fitness industry, it's more the education industry, I had to interview in front of Jessica, who is the academic dean, Greg, who is the program director, and Matt, who is the assistant program director. And they each had their own like different questions for me, you know, that ranged in like a lot of, you know, different scopes and different things. So if that's happening, just make sure that like you are, you know, remember, it really shouldn't be that different. You've prepared for some of these questions, right? You've thought about your interview. You know what you're going to say. It's not that different, even though it's being sort of rapid fire. Most of the time, though, it's going to be one-on-one interviews. This will be the most common sort of classic interview that you're thinking of. You are meeting with the hiring manager. You're meeting with the person who's going to hire you. You know, this is great because it's a really good opportunity for you to develop some rapport. And developing rapport, we know, is a really big part of our industry in general, because it's how you're going to get your clients to trust you, how you're going to get potential clients to trust you. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of practice those skills. How do you build rapport? Again, eye contact, and active listening, and an open nonverbal posture. So the final decision, a lot of times, if you did have a one-on-one interview, you know that that is the person you're trying to sell yourself to. You don't have to sell yourself to a team of people. You don't even necessarily have to be the most likable person in the world. You just have to be the most likable person in the world to this one individual. You are not a jack of all trades, master of none. You just need to master whatever this person most wants to hear. That's great. So if you do an assessment of their personality, if you notice, this is where you can even do, there's some sales techniques that we'll see down here. You can even do a little bit of mirroring. Mirroring, guys, is actually a very effective method for putting someone at ease. So if you notice that this person is like sitting upright, well, then you should sit upright. If you know that they are talking with a loud, authoritative voice, try to be loud and authoritative as well. If they are speaking very quiet and shyly, you actually would be a little bit better served also speaking a little bit quietly. Mirroring actually makes people feel a little bit more comfortable. So if you have a one-on-one interview, it's a good opportunity for you to be able to do that. And then there are the telephone interviews, right? These are usually used in situations where, or like I would loop like a Zoom interview or a Skype interview, something like that. If a physical interview isn't necessarily possible, this is what you're going to do. If you're doing that, I know, again, it sounds really weird, guys, but you should absolutely dress up for that phone interview. If you know you've got a phone interview at 3 p.m. on Friday, right? Well, then, get prepared beforehand, review the questions that you think they're going to ask you, groom yourself just like you would as if you were going in person. There is something about the tone of your voice. People can hear it, it's just like, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have ever seen where they've had people get on the phone with people and ask them like what they felt their emotional state was. And they've had the people on the phone like smile while they're like saying everything. And it literally just changes like that. Then there's something in the back of their voice. People can tell on the phone whether you're smiling or not, whether you're engaged or not. So try to do that and then minimize the distractions. You're by yourself alone in an empty room. And try to sit upright. I will say, if you're anything like me, when I'm talking on the phone, I actually think a little bit better when I'm pacing. So, I will sometimes do that, but I don't know that it's better. I just know that I feel more comfortable. Wait, go back. So that's our, and then listen very closely for audible cues. When your interview is speaking about certain things, listen to where they're inflecting. What does it sound like is most important to them? That way you can know what to emphasize and what to pay attention to, when you are, sort of parroting that information back to them. So dress up, stand still, or stand up. Use notes. That's one advantage to doing a telephone interview. You can actually take notes on what it is that they're saying, which is kind of cool. Watch the ums as best you can. I'm definitely guilty of that. I have a lot of ums in my conversation, right there, for instance. But you do want to just make sure that like you're trying to speak like coherently and confidently. What's that, Lorianne? And then try to minimize, like I said, minimize your distractions, right? Try to get yourself alone in an empty room. Now, general considerations, tips and tricks, if you will. These are the pro tips for your interviewing, right? Arrive about 5 to 10 minutes early. Anything earlier than that is actually a little bit annoying. Because I'll say, like, I used to book interviews like specifically, and inevitably what would happen is like if somebody showed up really early, I would get like a text message or a phone call from the front desk, and it was like, hey, your interview is here. And it's like, it's 2:30. I just wrapped up working with my students. I'm sitting down talking to people about, their homework and stuff, or people who need a hand on things. I set this interview for 3 o'clock because I knew that's when I was going to be free. Don't arrive too early, but always arrive early. Never, ever, ever show up exactly on time or late. If you're 5 minutes early, that's going to be perfect. Once you're there, wait patiently. check in a lot of times. You'll speak to the front desk and let them know, say like, hey, I'm here for an interview. If you're working in a traditional gym, the front desk will, oftentimes the interviewer will make the front desk aware of that. And so they'll know it's like, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead and go back to, the sales department, or, you're going to head upstairs. There's an office up there, or wait here patiently. They're going to come down and get you. Once you're there, try to maintain eye contact. That's that nonverbal communication that we talked about, the active listening, right? A firm handshake is going to be really important. It just shows that you are confident. So making eye contact, giving them a firm handshake, don't try to crush their hand or anything like that. And then try to make small talk, small talk is always like a really kind of fun way for you to sort of endear yourself to this person that you're interviewing. Remember, one thing you have to consider about interviewing, they're looking for the best candidate for the job. They are also going to consider what kind of coworker you're going to be like. If you're a fun person to have a conversation with, you're exciting to work with, that's somebody that's like, hey, I could see myself hanging out around the water cooler with this person. It's just like freaking politics. I hate this. But they ask a lot of people, you look at like uneducated voters sometimes, and they'll be like, why did you pick the candidate? And it's like, oh, they just seem like the kind of person that I could sit down and have a beer with, that is often the candidate who most wins. That is a true story. So make small talk, be personable, but at the same time, you do want to maintain that certain level of professionalism, make small talk, but don't drop any curse words, during your interview. Don't say anything that's, controversial. Don't bring up politics, religion, anything like that, maintain a certain level of professionalism. But if they say like if they ask me, like, if you've got a fun fact about your hometown, it's like, hey, how long you been living in LA? It's like, oh yeah, I moved out here from Oregon, I'm from Astoria. If you've ever seen the Goonies, that's my hometown. They go, oh really? I love the Goonies. Yeah. That's like a small, fun little like factoid. There really just is, something to kind of endear you to this person. So that honestly is actually the end of our notes section here, but we actually have a lot of slides to go through. I want to give you guys some example interview questions that we're going to run into. So there are a lot of different types of questions and things that you should be prepared for. You'll get some personal questions. They shouldn't be too personal, but they are just a little bit about you, often used as like icebreakers. You're going to get some philosophical questions sometimes. A lot of times you'll get very knowledge-based or experienced questions. I know you guys might not necessarily have a lot of like in-house, working in a gym experience, but trust me, the types of knowledge and experience questions they're going to ask you are definitely ones you are going to be prepared for. It's all the stuff that we talk about all the time. And sometimes they'll hit you with the think on your feet questions, like, what do you do if your client shows up 15 minutes late for the session? What do you do if your client cancels? They want to know, if they ask you that question, which is a classic in the training world, they want to know that you're going to still charge your clients. Like, well, I'm going to follow the 24-hour cancellation policy. They gave me notice. Great. I'll probably try to rebook somebody else into that training slot. But if they don't give me any notice, I'm going to charge them. I got to, that's what they want to hear. That is literally the kind of thing they want to hear. They want to know that you're going to do the job the way it's intended. So personal questions, what are they, right? These are things, like I said, they shouldn't be like, what's your sign? Nothing like that. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for like, why they want to know why you want this job, right? Talk about like what you learned. You did your research on this agency by this point, right? Cater the why to that. Like me, when I was interviewing for Sochi and they asked me like why I want to do this, it's like, well, I've always found that I enjoy explaining things and I enjoy, working with as many clients as I can. The idea that I can like, give my knowledge to people who are going to take that knowledge and they're going to train hundreds and hundreds of clients. And the idea, like knowing that like I can spread my take and have a big impact on the fitness community, that's really exciting to me, So that's like what the personal motivation behind like my interview was, they said, tell me about yourself, right? Talk about why you decided to get into personal training. What are your hobbies and interests? For me, I love when people ask this because I definitely bring up ultimate frisbee. It's a goofy, funny thing to bring up, and they're like, "What's your hobbies?" And it's like, well, I'm a big cardio guy. I love running, and because of that, I also, most of my athletics are spent, ensuring like my proper health and supporting me as like an ultimate frisbee athlete. And oh, really? It's kind of a deep cut. It's kind of a fun off-speed pitch. And then I love this one to ask you what your short-term and long-term goals are. One of the best things you can say in terms of your long-term goals is like, saying something like, well, I want to see, how far I can work my way up the chain in the fitness industry. I want to have a large impact, Short-term goals, I want to procure employment and start building my client base. Long-term goals, I would love to be in management, that is exactly the kind of thing we love. That's the best kind of answer. I would love for someone in an interview who's like gunning for my job, because that means they're a motivated employee. There's lots of personal questions out there. What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Yeah, those are freaking classics. I personally hate these interview questions. I think they're kind of kitschy. But greatest strengths, you can say something like, well, I'd say my greatest strength is how passionate I am to like help people. Or, my greatest strength is I love explaining and educating other people. Whatever you feel your greatest strength is. Do you have a lot of energy? Are you motivated to work with people? And then your greatest weakness. For me, I tend to be a little overly talkative sometimes. I will say like sometimes my time management skills are lacking. My greatest weakness is sometimes the fact that like I want to do as much as I can in a day, and sometimes like that gets a little overfilled, which is why actually personal training works really well for me because it's a session to session situation, and so I can book my hours very specifically. It gives me more control over my schedule, and makes up for my greatest weakness. You say something like that in an interview, they're going to be impressed. They're going to say, wow, this person really has done some self-evaluation. People love that. People really do love that. There are also the philosophical questions. These are kind of fun. These are usually related to like your personal philosophy. Like, so what got you into fitness? Like why, what's your philosophy on exercise? For me, I love to say stuff like, well, when it comes to like diet and exercise, I'm all about inclusion instead of exclusion. I think that a lot of times when people are dieting, they focus on what they shouldn't eat, and they don't focus enough on what they should eat, I think that as long as you're putting plenty of good stuff in your body, you can worry a little bit less about like the bad stuff that you might be putting in, we've got natural filters in our body and stuff. And so I love to kind of say like, that's like my philosophy, right? My philosophy when it comes to fitness is health related more so than it is performance related. That's not to say that like, I don't work with people who are trying to improve their performance. It's just that generally the types of people I tend to gravitate towards are people who are trying to improve their health. What's your customer service philosophy? I love this one too. All right, here's the thing. If you're really confident and you are good at it, you can start to give some controversial answers sometimes if you also show a certain level of self-awareness that it is controversial. So for instance, like, I have done this before. What's your customer service philosophy? When I went in for Biggest Loser, they were like, what's your training philosophy? And I was like, well, if you're looking for the type of personal trainer who is going to yell at other people, it's not my style. I'm just not a drill sergeant style group fitness instructor. That being said, I am definitely loud and vibrant. I believe in inspiring people more so than I believe in, pushing people. And I will absolutely push my clients, but I will do it through like self, inspiration. And so like I said that, so if you're looking for like a yelling trainer, maybe I'm not your best fit. And I said that and I remember like later, again, my boss was like, that was such a weird, he was like, that was a weird thing to say. But at the same time, like it showed that you were so confident and we loved it, And I was like, awesome. So if you can do something like that, go for it. If you have the level of confidence that, if you can make it work. Philosophical questions are where you can be almost a little controversial. But at the same time, like don't do that if you don't have like a strong follow-up with it. There's also knowledge-based questions. These are my favorite. They're also my favorite for you to answer because I have a lot of confidence that you guys are walking away with a lot of knowledge. But these are just, they're just trying to understand like what your knowledge base is. So they might say something like, so what are you going to do if your client, shows up and they have like low back pain, what steps would you take if you were developing like a youth, we're going to say fitness program? What is a youth program? What are some of the differences between like a youth program versus like your traditional client? What's your favorite type of workouts when it comes to like weight loss workouts? Those are knowledge-based questions. Right, awesome. So it's like, yeah, well, if I had a client who is trying to lose weight, I'm going to prioritize all the things that burn the most calories. Probably going to focus on building compound movement exercises. Where we're going to focus on, limited rest periods, high repetitions. It may not be building the most muscle mass, but it will absolutely burn the most calories, which it sounds like it's our priority. I'm probably going to pick exercises where they're in a standing or at least a seated position at bare minimum rather than laying on their back, so we can get a couple extra calories burned there as well. And I'm going to focus on active recovery. If I've got a client who's like an athlete, it's the conversation is going to be totally different. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to focus on high intensities with long rest periods because we're trying to, build their maximal capacity, right? Or they might say like your experience-based questions, like what experience do you have? Now, that one can be a little bit tough when you don't have a lot of physical experience, but still, what is something you're going to do a self-assessment before any of this interview stuff has happened. So it is your opportunity to say, well, I may not have necessarily worked with too many kids, but I have like done a little bit of coaching, here. And I think that can very much apply to the world of fitness as well. Now, sometimes you'll also get these kind of interesting situational questions where the interviewer will basically make a very narrow, very specific scenario, and they'll ask you how you're going to handle it. A lot of times these are workplace questions more so than they are client-based questions. You guys have heard these interviews before where it's something like, all right, you saw someone in the break room, they went up to the vending machine and they kicked it in order to get a bag of chips to fall out, and they didn't pay for that. What would you do? Right now, I will be the first to admit, if I saw somebody steal like a bag of chips, I'm gonna be like, hey man, you probably shouldn't steal a bag of chips, but whatever. Sounds like you need $1.29, but the answer they're looking for is very obviously like, well, that person is clearly stealing from the company. I would notify a manager, right? You know what the answer is. You're probably not going to run into too many of these. If you do run into, usually this is the kind of thing that kind of comes up. It's like you kind of got the job, and it's like during the training process, it's all like those HR videos that we all have to watch. When you get a new job and they make you like go through the employee handbook, they're looking for the textbook answer to these questions. A lot of situational questions are like that. Most of the time, guys, just use common sense. Someone is injured. How are you gonna handle the situation, right? You're gonna call a supervisor, right? You get a call that one of your umpires used profanity on the job. What step would you take in confronting them, right? All right, let's say like you're applying for a management position. This is an umpire situation, but let's say you heard if you were going for a management position in a gym and they ask you, it's like, hey, one of your trainers was like cursing on the gym floor, what are you going to do? And it's like, well, I'm going to confront that person right away. You shouldn't be cursing on the job, You heard that your part-time staff is stealing from the department storeroom. What do? Yeah, you're going to notify your manager. If I saw someone steal a pen, if I'm being perfectly honest, guys, I'm probably not going to say anything. But the answer they are looking for, I know is, I'm going to notify a manager, right? So that is situational questions. You're not going to get too many of those in the interview process. A lot of times you'll get those types of questions, honestly, actually, once you've been hired. But there are absolutely right answers. Think on your feet questions. This is kind of a fun one. These are the weird ones. These are usually meant to be kind of humorous. These are the weird questions. Not everybody does this, which thank goodness, because a lot of times these are also kind of goofy. And in my opinion, they're a little sticky. You know, they're a little bit too much of a bit than they are real questions. And I don't really think they really reflect anything. But think on your feet questions there's really no right answer. They're just really weird ones. Like, if you were a cartoon character, who would you be and why? They just want to see a little bit of your personality, right? A lot of times these will be like the first questions they ask. If they are going to ask you something like this, it'll usually be pretty early on. They're meant to be kind of an icebreaker. If you were an animal, who would you be? Compare yourself to a thumbtack. I don't know. You'll get some very weird questions. This is one I've actually had in an interview before. If you could have dinner with any one person, who would it be and why? You know, that's kind of a fun one, right? I had a fun answer. It's not a think on your feet question. It's actually a professional question, but I had I had a little bit of a cheeky answer one time that was, the interviewer said it was like their favorite answer they'd ever gotten, because it was just me being goofy. And they were like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was like, well, hopefully married, you know, and not alone, you know. And they thought that was just like funny. And I was like, all right, no, but seriously, you know, I'm hoping to get into management. That's, if you give a funny answer like that, it is a way for you to kind of endear and build rapport. But read the room, guys. If that's a super inappropriate thing to say, don't say it. Woo. And then lastly, we got all of our closing questions here. So these are your opportunity to flip the interview. So closing questions are going to summarize what's saying. It's like, so they might say something like, well, all right, so in the end, that's most of our interview, but why do you think you're such a good candidate? Why should we hire you, right? This is your last opportunity to kind of sell yourself, or it will be the best one, which is, there anything else you would like to tell us? Or it'll be, do you have any questions for me? So questions for the interviewer, guys. This is mandatory. Like, it is the best way for you to seem insightful. It is the best way for you to, again, further endear yourself to the interviewer. These are the things after, you know, the interview's over. You got through the hard part. Now you're going to flip it and just try to get, this is like bonus points, right? This is the bonus round. So never pass up the opportunity to ask some type of question to your interviewer. So obtain any information about like what the job's going to be like, right? You know, ask something like, yeah, well, I mean, what do you think the day-to-day looks like here? You know, how many people does the average trainer interact with? Or, you know, how many employees do you have working the gym floor one time? Little questions like that. I mean, what does that matter? Who cares how many people work the gym floor? It doesn't matter. You asked a question. You wanted to know a little bit about the gym, right? Get some information from them. What's the typical clientele like here? You know, do you guys offer incentive packages for continuing education? That one's huge. Love that question. Some gyms will give you an extra bonus on your paycheck when you guys do your CEUs. It's built into our industry. So you could say something like that. It's not a salary need question, but you say like, well, do you guys have any incentives for trainers who are more heavily certified? What a freaking awesome question, right? It shows that you know how this industry works. It shows that you are looking to, you know, be incentivized to develop yourself any further. It's like, well, what opportunities are there for personal development within this company? Oh my God, what a terrific question. Or even things like, you know, what does retirement options look like here? Little questions like that. Salary, though, do not ask that ask that at the time of the offer. You want to figure out your salary needs. You can negotiate your salary needs in a second or final interview situation, or once the offer has been made. Generally, there's not a lot of like multiple rounds of interviews in the training industry. Most of the time, it's really just like a first interview is often enough. But this is not where you ask salary needs. Your good questions. Love it. Can you tell me a little about the typical schedule for a person in this position? Love this one too. What process is used to evaluate employee performance? That's great. It's like, what metrics do you use to evaluate how well I'm doing, right? Is it my sales numbers? Is it my client retention? Like what's most important, me, I know that like my sales numbers are pretty mediocre. They're fine, they're as good as they need to be. I'm not the world's greatest salesman, but I'm also, good enough at it. But my client retention is through the roof. Once somebody starts working with me, I do everything in my power to keep that person happy to continue working with me. So I will often ask, is there a redeeming bonus? Is there a client retention bonus? Is there something like that? What incentives are there? Are there opportunities for professional development? That's probably the best question, actually. Are there opportunities for professional development? That shows that you are interested in climbing the corporate ladder. You're interested in being there for the long haul. This interviewer is investing in you. They've already invested some time into even just giving you the interview. Now they are considering whether or not you are worth investing more time to train and more time to try to build your client base. They're evaluating all those things. So if you say something like, what are the opportunities for professional development? It shows like, oh, this is a long-term investment, right? Now, questions they are not allowed to ask you, or at least questions you do not have to answer. Any questions about age, race, religion, ethnicity, citizenship, marital status, family status, physical appearance, health, disabilities, sexual performance? Oh, sexual preference. Well, sexual performance, I can't answer that either. Criminal record, they're not allowed to ask you that. Non-professional affiliations or military record. They cannot ask you any of those, especially here in California where it's really strict. So any of those information that are not pertinent, you do not have to answer. If they do ask those questions, it's not even lawful. Refuse to answer those questions if you can. And then try to figure out like what the intent is. Because then if they're asking you inappropriate questions like that, you should probably be evaluating. It's like, all right, do I really want to work here? Right? Totally inappropriate. Then after the interview is over, there are still some very important steps to take. So if, if they interviewed you, it is generally a good idea to send a follow-up or thank you email within 48 to 72 hours. So after that interview, just sending them an email a couple days later saying like, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. I look forward to hearing from you. Something simple like that is great. If you get a second interview, awesome. We're super stoked. That means that they're probably pretty serious. It's probably down to you and maybe one or two other candidates. So what they're going to do is they're going to ask you some other questions that are a little bit more in depth than the first round of interview. So the first interview, they really liked your personality. The second interview, they're seeing if you are the best fit for the job. So go in with confidence, guys. Go in feeling like a freaking rock star, So you should be prepared to ask the interviewer questions about the position, regardless of the type of position you're applying for. Make sure that your professional appearance and your professional demeanor are maintained throughout. So you want to make sure you are, taking the time to say like, yeah, I'm taking this process seriously. And that's honestly about it about interviewing. It's honestly, this is something that you kind of just practice. The more interviews you guys go on, the more comfortable you are going to get with them. But hopefully that kind of gave you an idea of what it's like to kind of interview in this industry, because this industry is pretty unique, it is unique compared to some of the other ones. So it is a little bit more casual, but at the same time, like the emphasis in this industry is not about even you or the job. It's about the people, you know. Gyms they live and die on their client base. And the people who are hiring you need to know that you are going to take care of that client base. So I know it's a little bit shorter today, but any questions, comments, or concerns? You have any questions about these interviews? Remember, asking questions is very important. Nope. All right, guys. I know it was brief, but I'm gonna let all y'all out of here. We don't have any homework today officially, but we will, because what, today's day 5? Am I crazy? Oh no, today's day 4. Wait, where am I at? Hold on. Where are we? Where am I? Yeah, it is day 4. All right, so day 4, we don't have, normally we would have homework today. We'd have a 15-question quiz. But if you want to start working on your cover letters and resumes, that is what you should spend your time, you know, committed to doing. Even if it's not necessarily actually writing them, but just Google some images of cover letters, start getting an idea of what a solid cover letter looks like. Get some line paper out and maybe write a couple paragraphs that are, you know, strong indicators of like what's important to you in the fitness industry, right? Why you want to work somewhere. And maybe do a little bit of research, guys, on places that you want to work. You know, figure out what type of gym you're interested in. Figure out what your resume, you know, find a format that you think is going to work so you can bring it in to me, or you can start working on it. So either start working on those resumes and cover letters, or at least start doing a little bit of research and think about like what you're going to say in those things, and we can continue working on those later. That's about it. All right, guys. Let me kill the recording here, and I'll see all you guys tomorrow.